Watch out, the mombies are here and they're ready to attack. A mother keeps trying to ruin her daughter-in-law's to-be wedding, but what insane thing will she do next that will cross the line and make everyone angry? This woman is mentally preparing for the birth of her child. What she doesn't know is that her mother is also preparing and has a plan of her own for how the birth will go. A couple rescue a dog from a pound and treat him with love and care. Enter the entitled mom who makes up crazy lies to get away with her selfishness. What bizarre thing does she tell the couple? You'll only find out by watching this episode of VoiceyHere's Entitled Parents, featuring Just Know Mother-in-Law. This story was called The White Dress. This story is about my friend's mother-in-law and her wedding. Strap in, guys, this is a wild ride in which I did the thing that got me banned from any of her family functions. A good friend of mine from university was getting married. They had been a couple since junior year of college, through her 2 years in the Peace Corps, and currently her return to this continent. 6 years in total. She had been to all manner of family functions, and always came back with a strange story about how she thinks her mother-in-law secretly hates her. But she, being a very quiet and sweet person, pushed those thoughts aside. Point 1. She is vegetarian and Jewish. Husband is not. She was invited and went to Christmas dinner, and figured she would just eat sides. As well as she brought a vegetarian casserole. Mother-in-law, after knowing her for 3 years and being told by husband a few weeks before about not to forget friend doesn't eat meat, proceeded to put meat in every dish. My friend drank water and ate her casserole the whole night, while mother-in-law cried to everyone that my friend was being so rude for not eating her cooking. Anyway, back to the story. A few friends and I were asked to be in the wedding. Friend has a huge family, and so this was not going to be a small affair. Neither of them is particularly religious, but friend said it would be nice to be married under a hoopah. Think an arbor, but 4 poles and covered with a white cloth, and lots of flowers. Husband said he could care less, and told her to go and rent one for the wedding. I was at the bridal shower when mother-in-law found out the pretty canopy was actually a hoopah. She almost lost her mind in front of a bunch of people, but managed to compose herself and laugh angrily that if the Jews were being represented, so would the Catholics. In my head, I heard a record screech. Guys, they aren't Catholic. So after much fighting, a lot of screaming, crying, threatening to pull money, which is funny because she contributed nothing, mother-in-law lost. The boot was firmly placed and nothing was moving it. Hoopah yes, Catholic priest no. Things got stupid quiet. My friend texts me the night before the wedding that she has a bad feeling. I tell her it's probably just nerves. She is getting married and this is a big deal. Oh, how wrong I was. We all show up, get our hair and makeup done, slip into our bridesmaid dresses, and hang out waiting for the bride to be finished with her hair. She makes a comment saying she hasn't seen mother-in-law all day and that she skipped her hair and makeup appointment. We all side-eyed each other, took a few sips of wine, and hoped the eerie feeling would go away. 30 minutes later, as we were helping the bride into her dress, guess who shows up? If you guessed mother-in-law, you win a cookie, flushed from coming up the stairs. She is not a light woman, in full hair and makeup, and a white dress. Not ivory, not cream, full snow-freaking white. The dress was clearly a wedding dress. It was even from David's bridal, which she would later shout at me. Floor-length satin with a sweetheart beaded top, a bit of a train, and off-white lace on the bottom. The dress was even tailored to her. This has been a long con she has orchestrated. The bride burst into tears, and aunts and friends ushered mother-in-law out. We did our best to console the bride, touched up her makeup, and I made her a promise that the dress would never be seen in a photo. She looked me dead in the eye and nodded. The game was on. The venue only supplied white wine and champagne for the wedding party, but I grabbed my purse and ran down into the reception area and managed to flag an attendant by the bar and bribe him with a cool $20 to give me a bottle of red early. I cracked the baby open, filled a solo cup to the brim with it, and stalked outside. After a few swigs from the bottle for courage, I went over to where everyone was getting ready to take photos. With one last hard stare at my friend, I got her nod of approval. I pulled out my phone, held it in front of my face like I was reading a text, and walked straight into mother-in-law. I poured the entire cup of red wine down the front of her dress, jumped back, and gasped. The look on her face was murderous. She screamed, yelled, threatened, and promised she would sue me. People had to hold her back because she wanted to fight me. Eventually, she switched from screaming to sobbing and sank to the ground and threw a tantrum on the floor. Everyone moved back and just let her go at it and walked away to go take photos. It was surreal, as if everyone just hit their limit and noped out from around her. The 12-year-old flower girl whipped out her phone and snapped a few photos, much to our amusement. This is already super long, but I will say that mother-in-law went home and changed only 20 minutes from venue into a nice dark green, too small and low-cut dress. Because of this, she missed all the photos. The wedding was beautiful. I got death glares from everyone she told that I attacked her with wine. No craps were given as I drank and danced with friends. Bride thanked me in secret, and 3 months later, took me to the spa for a day of pampering. You can't choose your mother-in-law, but you can choose your bridesmaid, and in this case, the bride chose very wisely. Part of the job of a groomsman or bridesmaid is to make sure the day goes smoothly, and I would say taking a mother-in-law that's trying to sabotage the day out of play is definitely a good bridesmaid. I'm pretty sure it's a faux pas just to show up in white on a wedding day, so you have to be a pretty spiteful person to want to sabotage a wedding so much just because you didn't get it your way, to actually show up in a wedding dress. And what exactly do you achieve except for complete humiliation? I mean, maybe 5 years from now people will forget that you did something like that, but people don't forget the feeling of who they want to associate with, and nobody wants to associate with somebody like that. This fan-submitted story was called EntitledMom Decides She Really Wants to Be Part of Her Grandchild's Birth. So, for some context, I'm a 20-year-old woman who is currently pregnant with my first child. My boyfriend and I have been together for a while, and I got pregnant pretty soon after we got together. When my mum found out, she was ecstatic. She is a midwife and really loves babies. I'm the second oldest of my grandparents' 9 grandkids, so I watched her literally pluck each of my 7 younger cousins out of their parents' arms and whisk them away, only to ignore and neglect me while doing so. Once done, she'd plop the child back and expect her brothers or sisters to just take the child back and leave. Anyway, about 7 months ago, I was living with my dad, stepmom, older brother, and little half-brother, when my older brother started doing the same things he did when we were younger, using me as his personal punching bag. And when I exploded with rage at the fact neither of my parents even said anything to him, I was simply referred to as a selfish, attention-seeking brat. It was that moment I decided I wouldn't stay there a minute longer, so I grabbed my stuff and moved in with my friend, where I've been living ever since. Anyway, back to my mum. In all the time I lived with my friend, my mum was only about 10 minutes down the road, but would only want to see me once a month or less, until I got pregnant. Then she was inviting me out for lunch, or taking me over to see my granny, who is a wee sarcastic savage by the way. One day, about a week ago, we were sitting having tea at my granny's when she turned around and said something before carrying on drinking. Now, I wasn't really listening because I was texting my friend about a drama she was having, so I simply said, "What?" In response, she rolled her eyes and repeated,
"I can't wait till you give birth, honey. Delivering your baby's going to be magical."
I pure deadpanned at her. Then I started to laugh, but quickly stopped when I realized she wasn't joking. Yeah, that's a big no from me. I don't want you down there. She actually seemed to shift into a more hostile manner once the no was given.
"Well, why the heck not? I'm your mother. If anyone is doing it, it should be me. I have every right to."
Once I proceeded to tell her that yes, she is my mother, but it is still my child, and I decide who I want delivering my baby. She quickly changes her tune.
Fine then, but I'll at least be there in the room with you. I can be your birth partner.
Once again, I shot her down with a quick no. For some context on that, the hospital I have chosen for the birth only allows one person in the room with you at the time of the birth, and my boyfriend has been amazingly supportive through the whole pregnancy and is working his butt off to support me and the baby. I would be working too, but I was recently fired from a very popular fast food franchise for being pregnant. So when she once again said that she is my mother and has the right to be there, I simply reminded her that no she doesn't, and that the baby is my boyfriend's as well. There's no way in hell he is gonna miss the birth of his first child. She flapped her mouth open and closed for a few seconds before putting her cup in the sink and telling me to get in the car. I said goodbye to my granny, who told me to take no notice of her and have a good day. I headed out to the car and my mum drove me home in silence. I didn't hear from her in the next month until a few days ago when her new husband called me, and when I asked for an apology, she grabbed the phone and said,
I don't need to give an apology because I'm your mother, and that's my grandchild. I have every right to be there. Just hope you're a good mum to that baby, or else it'll be coming to me. I'm its grandmother, and I deserve to raise my grandchild if you can't.
In response, I simply told her to act like a mother instead of a spoiled brat, and went on my day. I think she's still waiting for me to apologize, as if that's ever going to happen. This seems to be a common occurrence for entitled parents. They think simply because they raised someone, that they then basically get to rule over them for the rest of their lives. I think this is why teenagers tend to rebel so much in their teenage years, is because they're trying to fight for their independence and become their own person. I don't think it's so much that they're trying to rebel as they're trying to declare, I have the right to make decisions in my life, just like you have the right to make decisions in yours. Unfortunately for entitled parents that don't get this, tend to have the worst relationships with their kids when they grow up. If you respect your kids enough to let them make their own decisions, they'll choose to come to you for advice, and they'll want to make you a part of their life. This story was called Mother-in-Law Says Dog Died. I find him at the pound 4 days later. The backstory. My dear husband has an ugly history with his stepmother, who is a terrible person. His father was a really great man who has since passed. There are a few other dog-related stories in their history, but this one was the only one I was involved in. We adopted a beagle named Winston from the shelter when he was already over 12 years old. His owner had passed, and he was so sweet and sad, we decided to take him home. He was with us for about a year and had a few health problems, but nothing major. One weekend we went out of town and asked our in-laws to watch Winston while we were gone. When we got home, my father-in-law was reluctant to return him, as they had bonded over the 3-day weekend. My in-laws had a small shepherd dog at the time named Minnie. I hadn't ever heard them complain about her in the past, but when we picked up Winston, my mother-in-law started making a huge deal about how Minnie was digging holes in their yard, which wasn't some fancy yard, but whatever. After a week or so of father-in-law bugging my dear husband, we decided to trade Winston for Minnie. I figured it was a quiet environment for him being a senior, and I hated to see Minnie wind up in a shelter, which was what I suspected would happen. They had Winston for about a year when my dear husband and father-in-law went on a trip together. A few days after they left, my mother-in-law called me all upset. She said that Winston had a seizure, and she took him to the vet, and the vet wound up putting him down. I was in shock. He had one very mild seizure when we had him, and I knew he had a few when he was with them, but they said that he was being medicated. After we got off the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with her story. She added the detail that the vet didn't charge her for putting him down because he felt sorry for her. It struck me as an odd, unnecessary detail. I decided to call their regular vet and ask about what happened. They told me that they hadn't seen Winston and didn't know what I was talking about. I decided to call another vet in the same area, but I had to leave a message. This was on Friday afternoon. The vet was closed over the weekend, and the boys returned home on Sunday. My husband and I went over the story and both picked out things that we thought didn't add up. My husband asked his dad which vet she took him to, and he said it was the first one I called. Monday morning, the second vet's office called me back. I asked if someone had brought in a beagle having a seizure, and after a pause, the woman told me that a woman in a bathrobe and slippers, no doubt my mother-in-law, had brought in a beagle and said she hit it with her car and didn't know who it belonged to. They turned it into the pound. The pound is not open on Monday, so I had to wait until they opened on Tuesday to see if it really was him. I was there as soon as they unlocked the doors. When I walked into the dog kennels, I heard him baying and burst into tears. I couldn't believe that after everything he had been through, he had to spend 4 days in the pound, abandoned again. It cost me over $200 to get him out, which we did not have to spend, but there was no way I was leaving him. When I got home, my husband couldn't believe his eyes. We took him straight over to my in-laws to confront her. She dug in and said that he was having a seizure, that the vet told her he was putting him down, but he must have lied. We knew we weren't getting anywhere, so we left with Winston and went no contact for about a year. My dear husband still had a relationship with his dad, but we never trusted her again, so we wound up with both dogs, and Winston was totally fine. He lived 2 more years before he developed cancer and had to be put down. Minnie never dug a single hole in my yard. Do you think this mother was a pathological liar? Or do you think she just had no confrontational skills whatsoever, and so would just make up excuses to get rid of the dog? Relationships, even good relationships, can be hard to maintain. When you do stuff like this, people just don't want to relate with you, which is why these guys went no contact for a whole year. If you have a problem with something, in this case the dog, you need to talk to them about it. You need to communicate. If you go behind their back and lie to them, not only have you done something to hurt them, but you've broken trust in the relationship, and you can't have a relationship without trust. This story was called Entitled Mom Wanted Me to Move the Date for Scout Meeting and Scout Camp. So a bit of backstory. I have been a scout leader for about 2 years at the time this happened. With this comes a lot of dealing with parents and of course children. This happened about 3 years ago. Entitled Mom sent the Beaver leaders an email to ask us if we would move her daughter's scout meeting. Keep in mind, 20 other kids will be at this meeting, to another day. The reason being that her daughter's school had a dance on the Wednesday night. Me and my 2 fellow leaders found this a really strange request, but we emailed Entitled Mom back, told her politely that no, we could not move the meeting, since a lot of other kids would still be attending the meeting, in spite of going to the same school. Besides, we would not be able to move it, since all the leaders are students and work on a volunteer basis. An hour later maybe, I receive her reply. She is livid, going on about how Scouts is supposed to be for everyone, and how we are terrible people for not moving the meeting for her kid. We just replied that we were sorry, and left it at that. Entitled Mom never replied. Maybe 3 months later, Entitled Mom sends us another mail, this time asking us to move a scout camp to another weekend, because there was a father and child trip arranged by the school that weekend. Again, we replied that we would not be moving it, since every kid except EM's kid had been signed up for the camp. Mum got annoyed again, but we didn't reply. Later, we got an email from the Entitled Mom's ex-husband, signing their kid up for the camp, and he volunteered to come along and help us out with cooking and stuff. For an entitled person, the whole world revolves around them. Statistically, if you have enough people going to an event, a certain percentage are never going to be able to make it, no matter what date you make the event. So by asking for the date to be changed, she's not asking to be included so that everyone's included. She's really asking for her to be included and for others to be excluded. The reality is, if you've signed up for multiple extracurricular activities, like the dance at the school, you just won't have enough time to be able to do absolutely everything. If you'd like your story to be narrated by me, don't forget to visit the subreddit r/VoiceyHere, link below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Alright, I'll see you in the next one.